Hey everyone, it's no secret that we've not been particularly impressed with the PUBG port for Xbox One, and it's been all the more depressing really, bearing in mind just how fast and slick its closest rival, Fortnite, runs on both Xbox systems. However, to its credit, the PUBG Corporation has rolled out patch after patch after patch, and if you venture over to the Microsoft Store and search for PUBG Test Server, you can access even earlier builds of the game based on the second Miramar map, as you can see here. So yes, an early access version of a title that's already in early access. That's a new one on us, but we'll roll with it. So we were curious to see how well this would run, bearing in mind that there have been some positive comments about it online. Could the second PUBG map improve game performance, or is it the same old same old? Well, first of all, we've got to say that this is the test server, of course, so it should be considered even more unfinished code than the main download, which is already a game preview title. And as you'll see, this definitely has an impact, most noticeable if you're using a standard Xbox One and not the all-powerful X. But, you know, this is going to be the latest codebase, and of course the PUBG Corporation has already stated that console performance simply isn't good enough, so maybe, well, possibly maybe, with a fair wind perhaps, we'd get to see those performance upgrades in this test server version. It is, after all, an entirely different client-side download than the main game, so yeah, it's not actually just a test server as such. We're looking at experimental code here on both sides of the equation. But first of all, I want to take a quick look at the port of the Miramar map itself and how close it is to the PC original. Okay, so map fidelity has never been an issue really with the Xbox port on the standard map. It's all on the rendering side, so let's dig in and see what the major differences are. First of all, yeah, there's a bit of an overall view distance problem here, as you can see here. Now, this issue is in place on both S and X, and while it's mostly only noticeable in the beginning flyby, it can intrude into gameplay as well. So take a look at this panning shot here, X versus PC at ultra settings, and it's as plain as day. Now, ultra settings is obviously going to be beyond the scope of the X hardware, and typically PUBG has settled more closely to the medium preset on X hardware. But swapping to that medium preset, you can see that it's still not an issue on PC. So maybe this mountain view distance thing is a bug, maybe it's a performance saving feature, but you can't help but notice it. This shot isn't quite so useful for comparison as the time of day difference is so vast, but regardless, foliage is definitely cut back now to below the PC's medium settings. Also curious is that some textures and possibly geometry are very different here, and I don't think this is down to time of day especially. Again, the variance is there whether you're looking at PC medium or ultra. However, LOD popping, the process where lower detail models are swapped in with more highly detailed versions closer to the player, well, curiously in the mid distance, the Xbox is a pretty close match for PC. Regardless, I mean, it's a barren, often featureless desert out there by design. So yeah, there are areas where the Xbox One X version is, you know, a very close facsimile. Distant LODs apart, and pretty much the biggest difference in terms of the visual feature set comes down to shade and shadows. They are much more clearly defined on PC, even on the medium setting, and they stretch further into the distance. Also very noticeable is how little actual shading there is on Xbox One overall. It's kind of summed up here when you take a look at the foliage, which has no shadowing whatsoever. It's not great. There's also a pretty nasty ambient occlusion solution in play that surrounds objects with whacking great black halos, which really look a little bit ugly. However, there are some interesting anomalies in the map that, against all odds, show the Xbox One X version actually resolving more detail than the PC game, even ramped up to Ultra. So check out this scene here. Now you see it, now you don't. I guarantee you I've not made an error here, and I'm pretty sure PUBG doesn't have a dynamic map as such. But yeah, there's a ton more going on with the console version here. And just to illustrate the issue further, here's another view of the same approximate area. I flipped the view about 90 degrees clockwise here, and it's the same story. Pretty much more detail on the console game. By and large though, I think that PUBG launched as a game besieged by hardware bottlenecks throughout the Xbox One system, be it CPU or GPU, and on the graphics side at least, settings can be tweaked, downgraded if you like, to make life easier for the console. And sorting out performance has been the primary issue for PUBG pretty much since day one, a state of affairs the developer itself has acknowledged, of course. So let's look at the game again, this time factoring in both Xbox One S, with John Linneman at the con, and me be on the X. First of all, once again, let's emphasize that this is the test version, so yeah, we should expect to see some funkiness. But this? Interesting point here, PUBG on Xbox One X loads a ton quicker than the S version. Now, there's no real gameplay advantage here as such, because the principal loading is all done in the lobby area before the game actually kicks off. Now, on the Miramar map at least though, the X gets you into that lobby sometimes 20 seconds or more faster than the S, and that might explain remarkable stuff like this, where the initial descent to the desert can often produce remarkable Play-Doh style effects like this on the base system. It's really, well, not impressive, and we expect to see this fixed by the time the map rolls out to the main fork of the game. And here's another, well, how can I put it, interesting situation. Essentially, I'm busy navigating through the town here on my X, while John is basically looking at, well, not much of anything. Buildings are entirely invisible, and that's just straight up weird. In fact, there's a lot of weirdness on the test server, and of course, allowances have to be made, as essentially it is, as I mentioned, an even more unstable version of what is already pre-release code that has never run particularly well in the first place. And I noted a strange issue where often all networking would sort of hang altogether, requiring a full restart of the application to get it working again. It seemed to be linked to members of the Xbox Live party leaving, but regardless, again, it serves to illustrate that it's early days here, and I wouldn't expect to see this when the Miramar map rolls out to the main fork of the game. So what about actual performance then? I mean, we've seen some evidence that the game has been rationalized, if you like, since we last did a graphics comparison. Now, maybe that's a factor of this particular iteration of the Miramar map, maybe it isn't, but paring back shading is usually an easy way to reclaim some milliseconds of render time. Well, truth is that by and large, PUBG's desert stage runs just as well as the existing one, meaning that the performance boosts we saw previously are still in effect, while the main areas of concern do seem much the same. So performance while in the lobby area is not really that bad these days, and yeah, it's so much better than the launch version of the game. And even the initial carrier aircraft bit runs okay, apart from that massive jarring glitch at the beginning, which has always been there. But yeah, things still go to pot once you bail from the plane and begin your descent. In scenes like this, both S and X consoles can run faster than one another depending on the scene, and in this particular example it's pretty clear what's going on. The base Xbox has a clear performance advantage, but its streaming and rendering is all out of whack. I mean, assets, any kind of art really, is having issues resolving, whereas the X is looking pretty good, albeit with some really choppy playback. And as we move into gameplay, performance settles and finally artwork streams in on the standard console. But you know, even in game, when things are sort of okay, X gets a big quality advantage, as you can see in this clip where we stopped off to admire some particularly poor textures. Game 2 started out pretty much the same with identical streaming issues, giving an almost comedically bad impression here. One thing I want to stress here is that John and I only actually played 4 multiplayer sessions together, so this wasn't a case of deliberately picking out bad parts of the game. On the S, this is what we saw pretty much consistently, and it quickly becomes clear that just like the first map, some areas just run poorly, with S and X jostling for position for performance leadership before the X eventually moves ahead. Again, it's PUBG as we've always known it on Xbox One. Sometimes fine with properly frame-paced 30 FPS, and then some big performance drops. Also very familiar is the game's issues with maintaining performance while moving at speed across the map. Possibly why the parachute descents are always so bad. Whether first person or third person, it's not great, and it's interesting to note that even the PC version running on a fast Intel i5 can still stutter during fast traversal. I've not really talked about S versus X comparison, but it is generally about draw distance really, particularly on foliage elements where the X does better, and of course, yes, the X is running at native 4K versus 1080 on the standard Xbox One. Interestingly though, I did notice a welcome change on PUBG compared to the last time I looked at it. Specifically that the Xbox One X version featured depth of field on menus that tanked performance, making navigating through your inventory and whatnot really difficult. Standard Xbox doesn't have it, meaning that in those areas it actually ran faster, but when we look at the code now, both systems now have that depth of field disabled, and performance is better on the X side, which is welcome, as navigating through options at 20 frames per second isn't a great experience. Now John left me at this point and I kept playing on the X, and assuming we are looking at more evolved, if perhaps somewhat less refined code, there are still plenty of performance issues to address. Here I am at the end game hiding in a shack while my opponent tries to blow me up. Yeah, large scale alpha effects can still cause some issues, but I did revisit a crate drop and you can see here that the performance isn't as badly impacted as it was last time. And yeah, I do think that while many encounters with other enemies still drop frames, which isn't ideal, there do seem to be improvements here. Previously I couldn't indulge in gunplay at all without performance dips, but here things seem okay. So let's wrap this up. I'm going to stress one last time that this is the test server version, presumably running test code. Yes, there are bugs and glitches. There are also signs that PUBG is improving just a touch in terms of performance, but the locked 30 FPS that this game needs as a minimum is clearly still a long way off. I mean, yes, you can strip back the visuals to simplify things and get some performance boosts there, but gut feeling is that the CPU issues here are going to be very challenging to resolve. As for the port of the Miramar map itself, it's good enough I guess, but there's still a fundamental ugliness overall that is far less of an issue on the PC side. I'll be interested to see what the final version of this map looks like once it rolls out to the proper game, but that's where I'm going to leave things for now. This is a 4K video, meaning that supporters of the DF Patreon, and yes, we love you all, can grab a pristine Ultra HD version of this video, but you can help the cause simply by liking and sharing our work. Subscribing helps of course, as does ringing that bell icon, which ensures you won't miss anything we publish. But that's all from me for now. Thanks for watching.